Amanda is joining us. Right. So, do we do a quick introduction once again? Welcome, everyone. Today is the 15th of November, 2023, and it's warm. It's that time, warm time, on your PhD or your postgrad journey. I know some of us are probably doing our honors, some masters, and some doing our PhD. So I'm going to share the slides. Okay. All right, let's do this. We will carry on with the introductions when we start the discussion, because I believe others will be joining, then we can have all that session together. And I've made it quite broad, or how do I put it? Quite broad, yeah, non-specific in terms of the presentation, because I know that we're all at different stages of our journey. And today we're going to be talking about, we're going to be talking about data collection issues. Initially, I had mentioned, or I had thought it to be something like data gathering issues, but I felt indeed let's use the right terminology, which would be data collection, data collection. But really, we want to look at the issues around data collection. For those joining us for the first time, my name is Dr. Judith Ojo-Aromokudu, and the program is called WOM, which is Writing and Research Mentorship 2023. We started at the end of the year because we're aware that many of us rushed to try and finish our research in the calendar year, even though we may not have managed that time well during the earlier part of the year, but all good. Once the year is not over, it's not over. And every extra day or extra week or extra month we have is actually very relevant. So the presentation outline will look at purpose of the data collection. What kind of data are we looking for? Data sources, ethical issues, even sampling issues, confidentiality, the capturing and the storage of the data, and then we can go into the discussions. So why are we collecting data? It's really a big part of your postgrad study. We need data. Either we're engaging with the data, we're investigating a particular topic. So we need some form of data to back up our study. And just to say that all along, the gradient or the graduation of our knowledge or gaining knowledge progresses as we go higher. And at the honors level, we want to sort of show that we can engage, we can carry out some type of research and write a research document, but it would entail less of raw data, primary source data, and more of secondary data. We'll talk a bit about that. And as we go on to the masters, you're actually now going to get primary data so that you can analyze and come up with some contribution to knowledge or contribution to a knowledge gap. And then at your PhD level, you're looking to develop new knowledge, something that we've never seen before, which is why I believe it can be a very daunting exercise, because you're looking for something that has never been seen before, has never been heard before, or some addition to it. So the purpose of the data collection, we need to be clear about why we're going out to collect data. It's not only to just collect, say, I've got the data, but how are you going to utilize the data in terms of your research? So the different kinds of data, you need to be clear. What kind of data are you looking for? Are you going for quantitative data or qualitative data? Quantitative meaning quantity, quite a lot. I think last week we looked at different methodologies, one being qualitative, one quantitative. And even determining what kind of data you would look for or you're going out for becomes quite important in defining your methodology. Quantitative being usually in the numbers, how you're going to analyze that data when you get it, and the qualitative being more in-depth, in how you will use that data. And usually it would be a smaller smaller sources of data that you would use for your qualitative. So the data sources would include your primary sources, very often with the field work, and you would use different methods of gathering the data. So it could come through interviews, through observations, and it's generally a more engaging process. Your secondary data would not entail field work because you're looking for already existing data, which could be in terms of publications, policies, literature reviews. And this is usually at honors level, but at the other levels, it would probably be as a backup to your primary sources. So you'd have secondary sources and primary sources of data, which now helps you triangulate your research process, the rigor that you would need in terms of the research. So selecting the data sources, I think, is also quite important that you carefully think through what are the data sources that you might need for your research, particularly at the research design phase. Is it a reliable source? Is it accessible? What are the response times that you would have in terms of getting the information you need? Is it safe for you to go in? And are there issues of culture or language which may form barriers to you? For this, I can give an example in my study. I'm an architect by profession, and I had to go into places like the informal settlement, which was my main data source. And one of the key things there was safety. How do I get in there? Issues of trust, issues of language and cultural barriers were actually quite key to me. And so I had to identify like NGOs working within the community that would give me access and be willing to introduce me to these data sources that I was actually targeting. So you need to really think it through. What kind of data and how do you select the data source that you might need? I think it also then goes to what kind of sample size would you be looking for? How many would you have? How much data do you need, and what would be your sample size? If you are you going to, or how do you determine what is your sample size, or what kind of collective you would need in terms to get enough information that you'll be able to analyze? This is actually both with primary and secondary data sources. You need to have that consideration and have it designed into your research so that as you go along, you actually making good use of the the knowledge or the samples that you might need for your research. I think also it then becomes, you have to actually think of the ethical issues. It's very important that you have a clear understanding of what your work is by giving an introduction, a well laid out introduction. You could share almost like a press and play. So my research is about informal settlements. This is what I'm looking for. And also clear up any misconceptions that may come up. For me, going into the informal settlements, there is this quick belief that you're coming to solve all the problems. You're coming to bring water and sanitation, because I was asking about water and sanitation. I was asking about well-being within the community. So once you start asking those kind of questions, there is a preconceived idea that since you're asking about it, you're probably going to do something about it. So in your introduction, you must clear up all those embedded misconceptions that may come up. And this should all be in the introduction letter, whereby you say, we're not coming to solve all the problems, but we're going to do a research. And then the next question is, so why should I help you? Why should I give you the information? And that also should be cleared out, that once the research is done, we would give you a feedback, and it may help in giving a better understanding of what is going on. Or however, it needs to be worded in a way that the community or the participants in your research are clear on what is expected, what they are to expect out of the letter, out of the process. There's also something called a gatekeeper's letter. In most institutions, you'll be required to get permission to go into a facility to gather data from that from that source. And again, it would state your name, what the research is about, and in most institutions, you would need that gatekeeper's letter for you to get ethical clearance from your institution. It's also accompanied with what we call an informed consent. The informed consent allows you to, when you actually go out on the data collection process, you share that letter with everybody who is going to participate, so that they know you get them permission to record if you're going to use an audio recorder, or if you're going to use a video recorder. And in some instances, I guess in the health sciences, if you're going to take body parts or blood or whatever, you would need those type of informed consent, so that participants actually know what information you're going to require of them and how you're going to use that information, who will get the information, the data that they are sharing with you. It's also quite important to carefully think through the data collection instruments. I think as novices, sometimes you design a data collection instrument, and then by the time you get back or get to the field to actually use that instrument, it may not be useful. So I would suggest that any type of instrument, an instrument could be like a questionnaire, an observation sheet, is always good to do a test run. You could do that test run with your colleagues, with your friends, depending on who you are getting the information from. So if, for instance, you're going to gather data from anybody, any non-expert in the field, just somebody within the community, you could pick anybody in the community and ask them to go through the questions with you. In that process, you would find out where there are loopholes, where they don't quite understand what you're asking, or you may find out that even the questionnaire or the interview schedule may need to be translated into a language that your respondents will understand. Again, for me, going into the informal settlements, I had to translate my questionnaires, my interview schedules, because I did a qualitative survey, had to translate them into the local language and have the context explained in that language to the respondents, so that you have a very robust kind of data that you will collect. And in so doing, I had written out the questions in English and got it translated into Zulu, the local language, and tested it with somebody within my, before someone outside of the settlement who was only Zulu speaking. And she gave me good feedback, like, what are you asking? What are you really saying? What, and it then helped me to refine the instrument. Also, I think it's important to think ahead of the instrument, in the sense that when you get all this data, how are you going to analyze it? So that upfront, you sort of group your questions in a way that would be usable in terms of the analysis. Data collection and storage. So you get all this information, data collection. I think COVID also gave us an opportunity to collect data in very diverse ways. In a project I was involved in, we actually collected data using the cell phone. And how then do you store it? Very important that you get the data and you're able to store the data in a way that is suitable to your institution and that you can access when needed to do the analysis, even in terms of the format that you would store the data in. Are you storing it as hard copies, or are you getting it typed out, or how are you actually going to store the data after the collection? So you've done all this now, you have all your data, be it secondary or primary sources. What's next? Yes, I've got my data. The data analysis. The data analysis has to happen. You cannot have data and, and not get into the analysis. This becomes quite an intriguing part where your critical thinking, your literature review, your theories, your concepts, they now start helping you. The lenses, the framing, theoretical framing which you have used for the research becomes quite important. And you start digging through, start looking at the data in a critical way to see what you can get out of it. I think we'll stop there for today. I've said a lot. Like I said, I'll just go through in very broad terms, and then we can have a discussion around it. So again, it is warm. My email address is there. You could send through emails, questions, and hopefully we would have our YouTube channel up and running where you might be able to engage. So thank you, and we'll have our discussion now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Judith. Thank you so